packet pushers.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Packet Protector. I'm Jennifer Manella here with Drew Conry Murray, and this is, of course, the podcast at the intersection of networking and security, or today, mostly about CISOs and networking. So fantastic guest today. We have Ben Corll joining us, who's a CISO in residence at Zscaler, but Ben really has a fantastic background. I think all of you guys and gals will appreciate, coming from network engineering in the Marine Corps up through various network infrastructure, security, knock and SOC roles into security leadership. He's been a CISO at several organizations, manufacturing, financial insurance. So fantastic insights here. And Drew, I think we're going to jump in a second. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, if a CISO role is sort of on your mind, something you've been considering, here's a great take on what you might actually need to get there. And I think Ben had some great insights on that pathway for technical folks who maybe want to move into leadership.
Absolutely. Let's get going. All right, Ben, we're going to jump right in. So as you know, we have this Ask a CISO series. And for our listeners, this is something new for you guys that we've heard is of interest. So we just want to kind of like bridge the gap between security and networking and other operational teams, and just kind of understand what different people in different roles related to security are seeing out in the field and how that influences ways that we can upskill ourselves or maybe just work better with other teams. Let me ask you this first, because I think one of the big topics now that we're past AI, the biggest thing that we keep hearing is, how the role of the CISO and security professionals is evolving.
Yep.
So I'm curious what you've seen out in the field, because of your role, you get to interact with a lot of different organizations and different professionals. So how is the role of the CISO evolving? And then how is that impacting us as individual contributors?
I will say that CISOs traditionally were coming up from a purely technical background. And hopefully now I'm seeing more and more where it's not just the most seasoned or the most technical person. It is not that used to say that the Unix sysadmin needed to be put in a back room, never allow them to speak to a user, but that person still got promoted because they were the most technically competent or understood the technology. Now, if you cannot speak, if you can't talk well, if you can't relate to people, you're not going to be moved to the higher level inside organizations. The CISO role is a business role, no longer just part of IT. Give me a seat at the table. Well, if you want a seat at the table, you have the responsibilities of being at that table as well. Of can you speak the business? Do you understand the business, how the business operates? And can you talk in risk, likelihood of risk, impact of risk on the business, not just the security team as a whole? So I think that's how the role continues to evolve, is no longer just a technical wizard, but it is going to be somebody who understands the business, can talk forecasts, is a strategic thinker, not just that tactical or technical person.
We've joked for years about, in the CISO world, the CISO with a big C and the CISO with a little c. And frankly, I put myself in the little c category because there's a lot of roles of what a CISO does with a capital C that I personally just have no interest in, which is why, I avoid that title now. But the little c CISO of we're little fledglings in the IT world, and we grew up into masters of our own universe and domain, but we really didn't know how to do any of the other stuff. And quick sidebar, side quest, rabbit hole.
Right after the first question, JJ, we just started.
I know. I was like, it's not a podcast with Drew and JJ if JJ doesn't go off down some random side quest. Okay, I promise this is my only one for at least a few minutes. But you actually teach like a leadership class at SANS, designed for professionals. Is that right? I think I saw that on your profile.
Absolutely. And really is, how do you train up that next generation of security leader? And that's some of the things that we really drill down on, is how to get outside those tactical skills. And how do you build? How do you understand? How do you identify the things that are important to the business? So yes, that is a passion project of mine as well, is how do you become that person when you're leading a team, be the leader that you wish you would have had in your first 5 years in the industry?
You talked about a balance between sort of technical capabilities, technical knowledge, and understanding the business, being a good presenter. being able to think strategically. Do you have a sense of what a good proportion is? Would you say CISOs probably should be slightly more technical than business, or the reverse, and why?
That's a fascinating question because you talk about the evolving role of CISOs, and did we all start as technologists, hands on keyboard, or are we seeing the rise of the CISOs of people who have, say, a GRC or audit background that perhaps understand technology but have never been hands on keyboard? They've never configured the firewall or the IPS or the actual skills, but they've audited it. So they understand it. They can talk to it. That whole thing of, do you dazzle them with your knowledge or baffle them with your BS?
I mean, that was sort of the thrust of my question. Like, can you earn the trust of the infosec and networking teams if you're like, oh, here comes the guy with the MBA. What's he going to say besides cut the budget?
You can sit here and take a look at some of the big CISOs that are out there and some of the Fortune 25 or Fortune 100 companies that are out there, and look at some of these CISOs that have never really had a CISO or a security role, yet they're running a huge program. And I think that's going to come down to who some of your key lieutenants are going to be. Is it possible? Yes. I would have said no, but I would have been proved wrong. So I think that's also going to be the network that you have around you and some of the other leaders that you have. I still think, my personal bias, is you had to live in the trenches in order to come out and to be able to lead that team. I would think that a CFO who's never been in that role is not going to be effective as a CFO, despite how good their team is around them. Same thing with the chief of HR, same thing with a C of anything, is I don't think they're going to be nearly as effective if they weren't in the trenches as well, understand those technologies to know when somebody really is blowing smoke.
So I have a question, kind of the second part of that first question, which is how is it impacting individual contributors and professionals? So if we're trying to evolve from a little C to a big C and we're focusing more on our business skills, and I hate to say soft skills, I hate that phrase. I think it's such a misnomer.
I'm with you.
But I think business skills is probably a better way to phrase it. How does that impact the people and the teams and operations that service those leaders or the security program?
Most organizations continue to build, they continue to train, they continue to build up their employees. So the users, if you will, but their colleagues that are there. Are we only sending people to courses that work on those, to use the reverse, the hard skills? And am I only training
hard.
people on the technical ones there? Or am I going to send somebody to the power of influence or effective presentations and trying to get people involved in Toastmasters and things that are going to educate them how to share a story or how to get up and confidently present in front of 5 or 50 people and how to have a conversation? All of those things need to happen in addition to sending the people to Black Hat or sending them to RSA and the other larger industry conference and smaller industry conferences as well. But I think we need to be more intentional to make sure that we are enabling and empowering our people with some of those communication skills, or dare I say people skills as well.
But Ben, telling somebody, hey, I did Toastmasters last Tuesday is not as cool as like, yo, I was a Black Hat in DEF CON.
Yeah, I do. And I've got enough plaques. I have the badges, and where I went to this conference and they gave me this cool badge, and I take pictures and I put it on I put it on my LinkedIn, and I try to get more followers and stuff. I completely agree. And I will say that when I started in the industry, we can go back to CATS and being the first CISO, when that happened and stuff. But when I started in security, it was around 2000. It really wasn't a discipline. So to sit there and say, I want to be a CISO when I grow up, really wasn't an aspiration. I knew I wanted to be a leader. I knew I wanted to grow into a leadership type role. But I hear a lot of people that are still in college and they want to talk to me and, will you mentor me? And I love to mentor. I prefer to mentor in person. So I do like to be local, because I like to sit across from somebody sharing a cup of coffee, or, well, they have a cup, I have a cup. We don't share the same cup, but I'd love to share with them. And I'm like,
Ben, I love that you felt like you had to clarify that for our listeners.
If you go to Coffee with Ben, he's going to get you your own cup.
You're going to get that big sipper, 64 ounce and 2 straws.
I'm curious, we're talking about this. What should a technical team expect from a CISO, or would a technical team even have that much interaction with a CISO?
I hope they have interaction because that should be a coach and a mentor for them, and difference between what a coach does versus what a mentor does. But that CISO should be readily available, and they should be able to get time with that person. That CISO really should be a person that each technical person skip level meetings, all of that. So you're not going to meet weekly, maybe monthly, maybe not one-on-one, but at least get some time that's there, but also be able to ask questions. So yes, a technical person should have access to the CISO. And as the team continues to grow and you have a team of 200, or some of these Fortune 10 companies have 1,000 people, are they going to get access directly to the CISO? Probably on a rare basis. But that deputy CISO or the VPs should be accessible and doing those skip levels of being able to, this is my thought, this is where I want to go in a career, and sit there and say, do I want to be a CISO when I grow up? Well, do you really want that target on you? Do you want that stress? Do you understand some of the implications with some of the SEC regulations that are out there, that your personal life and everything from a civil perspective? Do you want that? And if so, great. Let's create a plan. Or maybe you want to be content being the VP or senior director, and you'd be content with that as well. And I will say I've paid architects more than I've gotten paid. So it's not just about the money.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I mean, years ago, we were building out some of the stuff for the SSCP certification from ISC2. And one of the things they kept doing was taking CISSPs. So everybody's familiar with the CISSP certification. The SSCP is meant more for technical practitioners, sysadmins, architects, engineers. But the problem was they kept doing the job task analysis from the perspective of the CISSP, which would have been a boss typically or 2 layers up or down. And it was just really infuriating because the whole mindset of that peer group of mine was, well, obviously, if somebody's taking the SSCP, it's their stepping stone to this other thing. And I'm over here going, not everybody wants to be like you. Like, not everybody wants to do that. Not everybody wants whatever that role is that's tied to a CISSP or a CISO or et cetera. So yeah, I mean, I'm a big amen to that. Not everybody wants to be a manager. Not everybody wants to deal with people at that level. And I totally respect that. And, with the flip side being that sometimes you think you don't like something, but if you're coached and mentored the right way, you'll start to enjoy it.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm a big advocate of getting people outside their comfort zones and assigning something, stretch goals, getting people outside their comfort zone, because I want to be outside mine too, because that's where we learn. But the first technology company that I worked for, they were trying to force people into director roles as a way to retain people, because directors is where the bonuses really started making a difference. And what they noticed is they were pushing on a couple of senior engineers that they wanted to promote to director, give them direct reports, and directors are managers of managers, but they wanted these senior engineers in these roles to retain them, with the fear of, we will lose them if we don't get them into director roles, so we can't give them more stock or more options or whatever you want to do it. But they realized that those people didn't want to manage people. They're fantastic at what they did. So they created technical director roles that were really IC roles still, that didn't give them people responsibilities, but more responsibilities. So businesses can learn, believe it or not, and adjust. When you sit there, take a step back, why are we doing this? What's the intent? What's the purpose? And what's best for these individuals?
So the common advice we get is, if you're a technical person looking to move up the ladder and into a leadership role and even to a C level someday, is to learn the business. But can you put some more meat on that? Because you can be like, okay, well, we make sneakers. That's the business. What more is there besides knowing what the company does?
Well, that's the thing, is the first time I moved into that role, I was given a budget, and you had to have a monthly budget, a quarterly budget, annual budget. I had to understand all the different staffing levels, and I had to come up with travel budgets and training budgets and all. I'd never done that level before.
Mhm.
But understand, we make sneakers. So I work for a manufacturing industrial thread manufacturer as well. We made thread.
Mm-hmm.
We made yarn. That's what we made. And a lot of times I want to buy this. Well, in order to buy this, we have to sell how much thread, how many spindles need to be done in order to do this. But it's when you start rolling a control out, when you talk about implementing a policy, how is that going to implement your people? Well, using the sneaker, how many people are working in a factory? And if I put a new control in place, what does that do for my factory level employee? You're thinking about your technology person, your administrative worker. Some people call those knowledge workers. I say the knowledge worker is the one who's making the product you sell. So I'm going to call us, the people in our roles, the admin workers.
Mm-hmm.
You're likely thinking the control for the admin workers. What are you doing for the average person who's making the widget that you sell? What's the impact on that person? And is it too much? When you go out with your security awareness training, everybody gets an hour of security awareness training. How does that work in the factories for your factory workers or your doctors and nurses or clinicians? What does that look like for your type of business? And what's your model? Are you B2B? Are you B2C? And does that matter? All these sorts of things you have to start understanding as a business leader as well. And having a good mentor or somebody there, whether it's the chief risk officer who takes you under their wing and helps you understand that I put business cases together in the past that got denied and I took a personal. And being the head of cyber, if cyber is one of our principal risks, how could you ever deny my business case?
Right.
And this, the chief risk officer pulls me aside and goes, I, as the chief risk officer, have 35 risks for the business that are tracked. There's more, but there are 35. You're right. You are one of the principal ones. But just because of that doesn't necessarily mean you get the automatic pass. And he goes, I have 34 other risks that I have to take into account. Every dollar that I give you cannot go to these other programs and these other risks. And whether your plan, your business case was strong or not, it may not be the right time for you to get the yes. You can just change nothing but the date, submit it again next year and get approved. Or he would coach me and say, you didn't do a good case benefit analysis. He goes, I can't see from the financials why you're a better investment or why you're needed. What is the actual impact to the business? Well, words to avoid, it's the right thing to do, isn't a business case. Or if we don't do this, we'll get hacked. That's not a good justification. So how do you write it or articulate well? Know your business and sneaker manufacturers. If we don't implement X on our OT network or on whatever some of those critical assets are, and the factory goes down, we lose $250,000 per hour while this factory is down. From a resiliency, from a continuity perspective, this $10,000 change can keep us up. We go from 4 nines to 5 nines, and this is the benefit to the business. Can you talk like that? And can you back those numbers up?
Is there a way for security professionals to justify investment in security in a way that doesn't just rely on bad things will happen? We could lose $250,000 an hour, because they're going to be competing against business units that are like, well, if you invest in us, we can boost profits by 2x, and that's probably going to win every time.
It is really hard. Short answer is yes and no. And what I mean by that is, how do you go show your return on investment to the business of something that never happened?
Right.
So we rolled out multi-factor, therefore business email compromise. Can I show near misses? But one of the KPIs or KRIs, I'll just say metrics in general, that I used to push back on is how many incidents did we have this quarter or how many did we have this year? And I said, I'm not going to accept that as something you measure me against, because that is external forces working against me. And
Yeah, it's like how many hurricanes or tornadoes were you
Exactly.
hit with this year?
Yes.
If we have more than 3 hurricanes this year, you're not getting your bonus. Sorry there, buddy.
Ben, your fourth quarter hurricanes were up. I'm sorry. We got to let you go.
So I was like, don't count this. It's nothing that I'm doing. And if the company, back to sneakers, moves and says we're now using labor in Sri Lanka and we're moving out of the US, or we're moving everybody to Honduras because we don't want to pay US labor anymore. Now we have hacktivists working against us and targeting us because they're against our business practices. Now you're counting that against me because we're being more targeted. No, don't take that out on me because of a business decision.
And
All of
I would
those things
assume
from a risk perspective.
metrics like in the event of, an incident, how quickly did you identify it, respond to it, remediate it, recover from it, et cetera, like
Yes.
the string of the post boom activities there would make sense.
Oh, absolutely. Your standard mean time to detect, mean time to respond, mean time to contain, mean time to remediate, all of those things still need to be tracked and measured. And are we getting better? And this is where you have your high and your low thresholds of we want to be able to detect it in 2 hours. Well, this quarter, did we hit our 2 hour detection or not? And why?
And I think a lot of that, I mean, one of the drums, Drew and I beat a lot is sort of breaking down this silo between, again, security and other operational teams, including networking. So I'm kind of interested in your perspective of like, what are some of those common friction points, especially because of your history in infrastructure security and then security program management. Like you've kind of come up through this into a role where, zero trust is probably a primary part of, your portfolio. I believe in zero trust. It is not like the tooth fairy. It does exist. But I think, kind of working around to this idea that the metrics that matter really have to do with how do we identify something and then respond to it and contain it, which takes a lot of collaboration between teams that typically don't work together. So I'm curious what you think around that. Like, how can we reduce that friction point and do
Uh,
better?
I started my technical career, once I was out of the military at least. I started as a knock or, building knocks before I moved into security and started building SOCs. So the net ops versus the sec ops is still something that I am passionate and I'd love to see them merging. But some of the friction points is responsibility. Who's accountable? Who's responsible? And is that perimeter based firewall, is that a network device or is that a security device? Who owns it? Who owns the device? Who owns the maintenance of said device? Who owns the policy? And I work for Zscaler now. And okay, does a network team own our product or does security team own our product?
Yeah, because
The
them there
the
fighting words are as soon
oh,
as you get a
absolutely.
product
It's
and
now religious.
yeah, a lot of products now span 2 or more teams, and it's,
Yes.
who's paying for it, who has to implement it, who has to babysit it and feed it and water it and nurse it into existence.
And finger pointing
Yeah.
becomes very prevalent when something doesn't work. It used to be, well, that's the network. Now, oh, that's the firewall's problem. And that's been common of just pointing fingers as well. How do we get the network team and security team to own the problem, to identify it? And I will say that you talk about the CISO reporting up to the CIO. Is that a conflict of interest? The only benefit you have when that is there is you're the same team. You're all part of IT. Therefore, stop pointing fingers, fix it, and get the business back up and operational. When you're peers with the CIO, you're no longer part of IT. Now you are truly siloed. You're two different work streams, two different budgets, two different everything. So it's like, how do we build these bridges of stop pointing fingers and fix it? Well, also, that whole thing of during a root cause analysis, what was the real root cause? And rather than fight the symptoms, do we know what really caused this? And can we address the root cause so we don't have to continue firefighting for the next 6 months on the same type of issues, one after the other? So again, finger pointing, ownership, responsibilities, silos. I really think we need to, and I loved rotating people from the knock and the sock together. And if you're able to do that and people are willing to do that, they go back as an advocate as well.
I think those cross trainings are so critical. I mean, especially like now with operational technology teams and enterprise IT teams and people they're dealing with IoT and, manufacturing, technicians and managers, like even just like you were saying earlier with knowing your users, whether it's the people on the manufacturing floor or a nurse or a this or a that, understanding what they do and how they think and how they use the technology is just so, so impactful. I mean, I don't think you can replace that.
No, no, no normal. If you know what normal is, if you know what this person generally does or what this team generally does, you get to work on your authorizations, but you also can start in your SIM and other solutions of creating why would a change from these are the only 5 people allowed to make changes to routers. So if it's not one of these 5 and you see a change, throw an alert, throw a log. No one should be logging on to root. So if you see a log on to root, boom, throw me an alert. Let's go investigate. If we know what normal is, we should be able to spot the abnormal.
Well, I'm curious, like, because you've managed, security programs, again, kind of coming up more from the technical side before you did security. What's one thing that you wish those technical teams or contributors understood about your role as the security leader or professional? Or maybe another way to word this for you specifically is what's one thing you made sure to teach them in that journey as you were taking over security?
Number one, we are all getting our paycheck from the same company. We are truly one team. And it's not us and the business, it is us as the business. So we are one team. We have the same desire to get the business back up and operational. And I'm not trying to outrunning a bear. I don't have to outrun the bear. I just have to outrun you. I'm not trying to shift blame and pin it on you. And as long as people are all trying to shift that blame pointed at other people, we're not going to be successful as well. And moving into security out of the operational role of you're trying to make decisions, but you don't understand the implications on me. Great. So now, before I make decisions, and before I say pass a policy and I'm crafting said policy, I want to understand who our stakeholders are. And stakeholders, anyone who's impacted by the decision I'm about to make. I said, controls of what are those controls on those factory workers or those knowledge workers through there? What's the impact going to be on them? It's the same thing as you're moving out of the operational of if we put this in place, what's the impact? And when I start building my metrics program, what metrics do I show? How easy is it to gather? And I did a bad thing on some program years and years ago of showed metrics that had been shown to me, not realizing it took one of my analysts about 40 hours to put the report together.
Wow.
And then I showed it to my CIO who showed it to, and then it's like, we want to see these every month. It it wasn't a repeatable process.
Right.
But I didn't understand and I agreed to it. Now we own it.
Do they love Excel though? Because some people freaking love Excel.
Yeah, well, Excel and PowerPoint, that's all I work in now.
I have a friend who's like, I used to teach advanced Excel, but my friend Julie like blows me out of the water with Excel and she can like do things and macros and pivot tables just off the top of her head. And for Christmas, I got her a couple of years ago a mug that says something like lady in the street and a freak in the spreadsheets.
I love it.
Because there are some people. But yeah, 40 hours for a single report, no matter how valuable it is not something you can repeat monthly, really.
No, but I didn't understand and I accepted it. And that person did not want to tell me what it took. So they were just doing it and burning themselves out because, of course, they weren't just working 40 hours a week. And it wasn't until I went and the numbers weren't ready. And I'm like, why? That I understood it. And now I had to go back and I had to get recommitments from the business and I had to sell them on why they weren't going to be getting the same things because it was too much of a cost for the value to the business. So I overcommitted.
I'm curious if you're deciding to go into a CISO role, are you sort of also tacitly agreeing to be kind of the sacrificial lamb if a really bad breach occurs or some other really bad security incident? And if so, does that kind of prioritize how you might approach risk management and infosec?
Drew, that's a bad question.
Oh, JJ.
How punny.
Oh my God. I'm here all half hour, folks. Stay for the late show.
No, absolutely. And I think you've heard me say before, I look at the term CISO and I had it on my bulletin board for a long time of CISO stands for Chief Impending Sacrificial Officer. So the short answer is yes.
Okay.
And you are the head of that program, but you need to own that program and you need to take it personal. And any attack you take personally, that's my program. I'm building it. And I'm very passionate about the programs that I've built. And I want to make sure that I'm doing a good job. But any breach that is there, and I preach, it's not sky is falling, but I let my board of directors know and I let the C suite know that nothing is 100%. Nothing is unpenetrable.
Mhm.
Not if we get breached, we will be breached at some point. So that's not a chicken little sky falling. That is, if there is a determined attacker, given enough time, given enough resource that is dedicated to our downfall, they will find a way to come in. Whether that's social engineering, whether that's finding a vulnerability that's out there, they will find a way in at some point. So, how do we make our organization just hard enough to get into that the average person or average attacker is going to go after the next organization instead of ours? But if things do hit the fan, have you trained your organization? And one of the organizations that I was part of, we would do tabletop exercises. I did a technical tabletop and I did executive tabletop exercises, or at least executive briefings of this is an incident, this is our incident response plan, and I walk them through high level of it.
Mhm.
And I had a major incident response plan, and I would walk them through some of the stages in the major incident response plan as well. And I had an executive stop me as I'm walking through that major incident response plan on step 3 or something. And he's, oh, you don't need to brief us anymore. Great. This is resonating. You understand it. You're living this now. Maybe you did, you pre-read it because I gave it to you ahead of time. And he goes, no. He goes, obviously, the things you've done and the things you've said have proven to be inadequate. This is the part where we separate, meaning we fire you. We separate from you, and every plan that you have, obviously, the plan, it looks good, but it's obviously flawed because we were breached. So you're gone, and so is all the plans that you created.
Wow.
Oh, how about throwing the baby out with the bathwater?
Let's talk about finger pointing. Like, if it gets to this point, you're out and we can't trust anything that you've delivered to us.
Yes. So I was a little baffled, and being the consummate professional that I am, I took a moment to compose myself and not come back as aggressively as possible. But I said, help me understand. I'll use your sneaker analogy as well. Going to be a factory of how many factories do we have? 200. Great. How many factories do we have that have zero safety incidents? Do we have 200? Is the safety officer fired every time? Or I said, one more, I said, from an HR perspective of, do you fire the chief HR officer every time that somebody comes and reports harassment? Because that HR officer is the one who has trained everybody, has gone through and made sure everybody had the training. If somebody then goes and harasses another person, do we fire that chief HR officer or not? But because of a cyber breach, you're now saying that everything that I have done has been inadequate and I am being let go. So I try to use logic there as well.
Yeah, that's a good comeback. How was that received?
It did not get received well.
I'm going to give you an A plus for trying, though. I mean, I do think that's a very valid. The breaches are kind of like acts of nature and acts of God and external forces that we don't have control over, as are your employees. So, and I'm a huge fan of tabletops. Drew, we had an episode, I think it was around episode 16, where we had Jonna come on talk through our Dungeons and Dragons for adult professionals. So yeah, check that out at episode 16. But I guess my question is, because I'm ever the optimist over here while Drew's Mr. Grumpy Face over there, what's good about being a CISO?
You get to own a program and you get direct influence and you get to guide and direct people's careers and never take that for granted. I had a colonel when I was still in the Marine Corps told me that anytime you get the opportunity to build somebody up, anytime you get the opportunity to speak in front of a crowd, and at that point, I was an extreme introvert and never could have imagined talking to or in front of a crowd as well. But he's like, you get to influence people and you get to guide their career. Same thing as a CISO of you get to own a program, you get to guide and mentor people, whether it's the people just starting, people that are 5, 10 years into their career. They're going to look at you, the things you do, the things you say, and are they going to look at you as the example of what to do or what not to do? That's the impact that you have on people as well. And it gives you the ability to talk to other business leaders and educate them. I like to say that when I go in front of my board and they start asking me questions, if they ask me, are we secure? That's a really bad question, a very broad question. And how do you answer? Well, we're only as secure as I'm able to make us with the budget that I have, with the staffing that. No, it means I haven't adequately trained them to ask me better questions. So that's not their failure, that's mine.
Interesting.
So, wrapping up, I have one last question that I just have to always ask everybody in a position like yours. And that is, why are we collectively so bad at like basic cybersecurity controls?
So that's the assumption that we are bad. And
And you said I was the grumpy face, JJ.
oh, but no. I mean, honestly, it's why are we collectively bad? I believe, and I truly believe that we are told that security should be seamless, security should be transparent, that users will not accept any controls or anything that stops them from functioning and operating. From a physical perspective, they'll accept a lock. They'll accept a key card to get into the building. They'll walk through the gates to get in and they'll lock doors. But they also, from a security perspective, from a digital perspective now, well, physical, they still have cameras in buildings and people accept that they're going to be recorded in there. But all digital controls, I'm being told, need to be transparent, like those physical cameras. They can't have an impact on a user's workflow. That hinders us. That stops us. I don't believe everything needs to be transparent. And people will adopt MFA. When I started rolling MFA out at the manufacturing organization, well, they have passwords. People will never accept an MFA. And I'm like, if they have social media, they already are used to this. If they have an account at a financial institution, they're used to MFA already. We're just behind the curve. So yes, users are willing to accept it when they understand it, when it's there as to be an acceptable control to manage a risk that they know. So don't just roll things out, but talk to them as well. So we're afraid we don't have enough influence inside businesses. We haven't talked to people enough. We haven't engaged with them and helped them to understand. It used to make fun of me when I rolled out the security awareness training of, oh, he's rolling this out again. This is going to be our annual everybody. No, we're rolling that out to really change people, change behaviors. And I loved it when somebody came to me and said, the thing you did on social media training, I showed to my teenagers at home. That resonated with them enough to share it. So that's what we're not doing, is we're not changing hearts. People don't understand what we're doing or why we're doing it. And we don't have the influence inside the business right now if they tell us everything has to be done seamlessly. That's our two biggest failures right now.
Yeah, I ran into somebody just this past week who does not work in technology at all. She knows that I do, and she came bouncing up and said, "Oh, I had to do my training, or I put it off, but I've got to do it this afternoon." But she started to be kind of like joking and poking at it. And she said, "But I have to tell you, it does help me secure all of my personal stuff too. It actually, we do learn stuff and it is helpful." And I was like, "All right, that's like win, right? We're going to take that one and take it as a win."
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I love the ask me anything or ask a hacker, if you don't want to use the term hacker, they ask me anything of setting up times that people can come just to ask one of your experts questions. What is a password manager and why do I need it? Why don't I want to store my passwords inside a browser? What's secure and what's not? What are practices I should be doing? Context is everything. And I could have all of that inside those training videos, but when it's relevant to them now and they're asking the question, it's real to them. So go ahead and answer it.
Well, Ben, thank you for this sort of tour through the career of a CISO. It sounds like, if this is a career path you're interested in, understand the business have a passion for leadership and training and helping folks, and maybe some Jedi mind trick persuasion level skills. It sounds like it could be in order. Ben, if folks want to reach out to you online, get in touch with you, where should they go? Do you have anything you're working on, a blog, a book, anything like that?
Always through LinkedIn. LinkedIn is such a great resource. So hit me up on LinkedIn as well. And I try to post all of my articles and blogs and all of that on my LinkedIn. Sure, you can go to the Zscaler website, and under the Revolutionaries, you can find my individual page there. But I always copy it to LinkedIn.
Awesome. And you also do training?
I do. So I do training through SANS as well. So you can look at my profile on the sans.org website as well and find when a course is coming near you, or you can come to wherever I'm at too.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Ben, for being here. And thanks to you, the listener, for joining us for another episode of Packet Protector. If you have a topic you want us to cover, you can find JJ and I on LinkedIn, or hit us up at packetpushers.net/community. You can join our free Slack channel with other IT and security pros. If you have a comment, a correction, or a question, you can reach out at packetpushers.net/FU. The FU is for follow-up, and we appreciate when listeners reach out. As always, make sure to eat your security vegetables.